You know that feeling, right? Like you're
Yeah.
just running on fumes. Or maybe that always on switch inside you feels like it's just stuck.
Yeah. If you're nodding along right now, believe me, you are definitely not alone.
It seems like so many people feel that way. It's almost universal.
It really is. And the statistics, well, they paint a pretty sobering picture, actually. We're looking at something like 72% of people saying they're struggling with stress,
Mm.
and a massive 70%. They're experiencing at least one feature of burnout, often a really debilitating one.
Wow, 70%. That's huge.
It is. And what's really concerning and kind of paradoxical when you think about it is this huge rise in mental health problems we're seeing, alongside this profound sense of isolation. I mean, get this, 330 million people around the world say they go 2 whole weeks without talking to anyone they know personally.
2 weeks. That's heartbreaking, especially when it feels like everyone's going through something stressful.
Exactly. It's this collective struggle, but so many people are just enduring it completely alone, in silence.
So, what's actually going on? I mean, how did we get here? To this point where so many of us feel overwhelmed and disconnected and just permanently exhausted.
Well, that's what we want to unpack today.
Right. So, our mission in this deep dive is to really explore this whole issue, this pervasive and honestly increasingly urgent problem of stress and burnout in modern life.
We're going to dig into how the definition of burnout itself is changing, which might surprise you. We'll look at the biology behind it all, what's actually happening in our bodies.
And crucially, the practical stuff too, right? Like science backed ways to actually build genuine well being.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
With a real emphasis on those small, consistent changes, the little things that, add up over time. Things that can help you not just cope, but actually start to thrive again.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So when we talk about just how big this crisis is, the numbers, they really do speak volumes. It goes way beyond those initial stats we just mentioned.
Like the 72% stressed and 70% with burnout symptoms.
Yeah, those are bad enough. But think about this. Somewhere between 60 and 80% of visits to the doctor have a stress-related component.
60 to 80%. Seriously.
Seriously. So this isn't just about feeling a bit frazzled or emotional. It's actually showing up physically in our bodies in ways that make us seek medical help for symptoms that, when you trace them back, are really rooted in stress.
That's a really powerful illustration of the mind-body connection, isn't it? What's going on inside manifesting physically.
Absolutely. It tells us loud and clear that stress isn't just in our heads. It's deeply biological, affecting our physical health in profound ways.
And what's really striking to me is how stress today seems to hit everyone. You called it the great equalizer.
It really is. It doesn't discriminate based on industry or age or even country. We're seeing it more now than ever before, right across the board. It's not just a C-suite problem or a frontline worker problem. It's an everyone problem.
And personally, people are feeling it intensely too. That stat about the last few years being the most stressful.
Yeah, roughly the same huge number of people said the past several years have been the absolute most stressful of their entire professional lives. That's not just a blip. That's a massive collective shift in how we experience work and life.
It really changes the landscape of well-being, productivity, everything.
It really does. And, my own journey into studying stress, kind of ironically, started because I was a stressed patient myself.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, I was a medical student, pushing myself like crazy, 80-hour weeks, the whole deal. And I got really deeply stressed. It was actually terrifying because I felt this bone-deep fatigue, just fundamentally off, but I couldn't figure out why.
And the doctors.
That was the frustrating part. I couldn't find anyone who really got it or who could offer more than just, try to relax more, which is useless advice when you're deep in it.
Right. Easier said than done.
Totally. So that experience, it just lit this fire in me. I decided I needed to become the doctor I needed back then. I started digging into the research, uncovering studies, finding real science-based solutions that went way beyond just telling people to chill out.
Wow. So your expertise is grounded in that lived experience too.
Very much so. It gives me a deep empathy for what people are going through
Wow.
because I've been there.
And your story highlights that point. Again, it's a collective thing. So many people are feeling it. But then there's that isolation paradox you mentioned.
Exactly. That 330 million people going 2 weeks without speaking to anyone. We're all under this immense shared pressure, societal changes, the always-on tech culture.
But feeling completely alone in it.
Yeah. It's a really strange, isolating feature of a problem that's actually incredibly widespread. We're kind of in it together, separately. The definition of burnout itself is changing pretty fast. And it's really, really important to understand this shift because the classic picture, It isn't always what it looks like anymore.
Okay, so what was the classic picture?
Classically, you'd think of symptoms like um, apathy, right? Deep lethargy, feeling totally unproductive, unmotivated, just detached from work.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Like you just can't bring yourself to care anymore.
Exactly. And in 2019, the World Health Organization actually designated burnout as an occupational phenomenon, basically a syndrome from chronic workplace stress that you haven't managed well.
Which was huge, right? Validating that it's a real thing, not just someone being lazy or failing personally.
Absolutely. But that WHO designation, that was before the pandemic hit.
No.
And this is where it gets really interesting, maybe even a bit more insidious.
How so?
Post-2020, we're seeing these atypical features of burnout becoming increasingly common. This isn't the person just staring blankly, totally disengaged.
Okay, so what does it look like then?
The data now shows that for a huge chunk of people with burnout, 60%, the main feature is an inability to disconnect from work.
Wait, an inability to disconnect. So
Yeah.
they could actually still be like really engaged, maybe even loving their job.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's the nuance. You can be highly engaged, maybe even passionate, addicted to the work in a way, but you just cannot shut off your brain. The work thoughts are constant, even when you're technically off the clock.
Wow. So it's like your mind is still tethered to work 24/7. That sounds exhausting in a different way.
It's incredibly draining. It's this constant mental churn that wears you down from the inside, even if outwardly you look successful or driven.
And you mentioned that phone checking statistic. That fits right in here.
It's a perfect, tangible example. People checking their phones, on average, 2,600 times a day. That constant need to check, that feeling you have to keep up with every notification, every email,
Yeah.
even if you don't feel that classic apathy, that's a huge sign you might be in the grip of this atypical burnout.
So you could be acing it at work, but internally your system is just redlining.
Exactly. Always scanning, always on. It's a very different beast from the burnout we used to talk about.
And it's not just about work, is it? You mentioned overlooked burnout.
Right. This extends way beyond the office. There's this really surprising and honestly quite sad statistic that 2/3 of parents experience burnout.
2/3. That's massive and probably underestimated.
Almost certainly. It's
Right.
likely way underestimated and underreported. Partly because of these changing definitions, but also because there's still so much stigma. Admitting you're struggling as a parent, that's tough for a lot of people. There's this pressure to just handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're listening, whether you're working, parenting, juggling both, that inability to switch off, that constant mental load, that could be burnout, even if you don't feel checked out.
It could absolutely be your personal canary in the coal mine warning you.
Which brings us to the so what question. Why does this matter if maybe you are successful hitting goals and you don't feel classically burnt out?
It's a critical question. I often ask people, what's your end game here? Is life supposed to be this relentless, never-ending sprint? Or is it more like a marathon, something you want to sustain with, joy and purpose?
A marathon, not a sprint.
Right. Because that high intensity, that constant pushing, it's just not sustainable long term. Something will eventually break down. Maybe it takes 10 years, maybe 20, maybe 30. But things start to fray. Relationships suffer, family connections weaken, your physical health declines, or just your own personal happiness erodes.
Because we just don't have infinite resources.
Exactly. We have limited bandwidth, both mentally and physically. Our bodies, our cells, they physiologically need rest, consistent rest. It's not optional for optimal function. It's a biological necessity. To ignore that, you're basically setting yourself up for an eventual crash. It's inevitable.
Okay, so let's get into the biology. What is stress, really?
Right.
And how are our bodies actually built to handle it? You mentioned acute versus chronic stress.
Yeah, that distinction is absolutely key. They affect us very differently. See, under normal, non-stress conditions, our brain operates mainly in what we call resilient mode, and that's largely governed by our prefrontal cortex.
That's the front part of the brain, right? The thinking part.
Exactly. Yeah. Right behind your forehead. It's kind of the adulting center, responsible for memory, planning, organization, strategic thinking, rational decisions, all those higher-level cognitive things. It keeps us calm and collected.
But when stress hits,
When stress hits hard or keeps hitting, a different part takes over.
Yep.
Not the prefrontal cortex, but a much older, more primitive part, the amygdala.
the amygdala, I've heard of that. The fear center.
Sort of, yeah. It's this tiny almond-shaped thing deep in our emotional brain, the limbic system, sometimes called the reptilian brain, because it handles our most basic survival instincts. And it hasn't really evolved much compared to our prefrontal cortex. It's the trigger for that automatic fight-or-flight response.
And our bodies are actually designed for that, right? For short bursts of stress.
Perfectly designed for acute stress. We are literally built for it. Think about our ancestors, the cave people.
Okay, cave person meets tiger.
Right. Instantly, fight or flight kicks in. Heart pounds, breathing gets faster, more oxygen goes to the lungs, blood rushes to the big muscles so you can fight or run like heck. Pupils dilate for sharper vision.
Huh.
All happens in a flash.
Incredible automatic survival system.
Totally. But, and this is the crucial part we often forget after the threat passed, you fought off the tiger or you escaped. There was a moment, a vital chance to recalibrate. The danger was gone, your system calmed down, returned to baseline.
Ah, but our modern tigers aren't usually like that, are they? They don't just go away after a quick chase.
Exactly. That's the modern dilemma. Our tigers today are overwhelmingly chronic. They're not a single threat that resolves. They're things like persistent bills, ongoing money worries, relationship problems that just don't get fixed, lingering health issues, or just that constant drip, drip, drip of bad news from our phones and screens.
So it just keeps coming.
It just keeps coming. And that leads to this constant low-level hum of the fight-or-flight response buzzing in the background, a state of perpetual alert. Your brain never gets that essential downtime to rest, recharge, fully calm down.
And that's chronic stress.
That's precisely where chronic stress sets in. It's not one event. It's this pervasive, grinding state of physiological activation that never really switches off.
Which leads to that delayed stress reaction you mentioned earlier. That sounds really interesting and kind of counterintuitive.
It is fascinating and often misunderstood. Think of our brains like dams. During really intense acute stress, maybe getting through a tough cancer diagnosis and treatment, or navigating the immediate chaos of the pandemic, we instinctively shore up our internal reserves.
We put on a brave face, keep it together.
Exactly. We soldier on, often without really cracking emotionally right in that moment. I saw this all the time with cancer patients. Months of grueling treatment, immense strain, but maybe not shedding a tear. Then they get the first all clear, the immediate threat is gone. And they're in my office, utterly exhausted, often just sobbing. The dam breaks.
Wow. So the release comes after the pressure is off.
Precisely. And it's the exact same dynamic for many of us collectively after the last few years. You might be feeling it yourself right now, this weird sense of, hey, we got through a global crisis. Shouldn't we feel relieved? Celebrating. But instead, many feel, or worse. Yeah, it doesn't feel like the Roaring Twenties are back, does it?
Not at all. Because when that acute stressor is finally seen as over, or at least less immediate, our psychological defenses naturally lower. And that's when the true emotion, often suppressed for ages, finally comes out, often in a deluge.
Manifesting as one. Increased anxiety, depression, sleep problems popping up everywhere, that general feeling of malaise, profound fatigue. Basically, burnout. So, what does this all mean for you listening? It means many of us feel worse now than we did during the peak crisis because of this very real biological delayed stress response.
Understanding that is huge. It's not about failing, it's biology.
It's just recognizing how our incredible bodies and minds work under pressure.
You know, it's funny how phrases like keep calm and carry on suddenly became ubiquitous again, especially after 2020. They were everywhere.
They really were. But they're not just quaint wartime slogans anymore, are they? In many ways, they've become symbols of hustle culture and what we now rightly call toxic resilience.
Toxic resilience. Explain that.
Well, resilience itself became this incredibly misused buzzword, especially post-2020. You saw companies, even some well-meaning influencers, kind of promoting it as a way to encourage overwork.
Right, like you're resilient, you can handle another project. Doesn't matter you're juggling 3 kids in a pandemic.
Exactly. It subtly shifted the burden. Instead of addressing systemic issues causing stress, it became about your individual capacity to just endure more. You're resilient, suck it up.
Which completely misses the point of what real resilience is.
Completely. And it's vital we reclaim the true scientific definition. Because resilience is an incredibly valuable human trait. True resilience is our innate biological ability to adapt, recover, and even grow when we face challenges. It's a fantastic quality to cultivate.
But the key difference is?
The key difference is that true resilience inherently requires honoring your boundaries. It means making space for rest and recharging your batteries physically and mentally. It means focusing on self-compassion, understanding your human limitations.
So it's not about just gritting your teeth and pushing through discomfort indefinitely.
Absolutely not. That's toxic resilience. That's the unhealthy mindset that puts productivity, output, and that mind over matter idea above everything else, often trampling our basic biological and psychological needs. It's just not sustainable.
And this distinction really helps challenge that narrative you sometimes hear, right?
Yeah.
About older generations being tougher or more resilient than younger ones.
Oh, absolutely. That whole less resilient myth needs debunking. You hear those stereotypical arguments. Older folks went through wars, depressions, they were tougher than Gen Z.
Yeah, that comparison.
But the huge rise in mental health issues, burnout, chronic stress among younger people, not because they're inherently weaker or less resilient, it's because they're navigating a world that is fundamentally different.
Hyper-connected, always on.
Exactly. Hyperconnected, constantly bombarded, and they've lived through layers of collective trauma pandemics, economic instability, political chaos, climate anxiety, all amplified by this relentless digital world. Their experiences are valid and incredibly difficult.
So we need to validate their struggles, not dismiss them as lacking grit.
Precisely. Their challenges are different, often more complex, but absolutely real. So stress, as we've said, it shows up differently for everyone. It's highly individual. The physical signs can vary hugely.
Like what kind of things?
Oh, you might get heart palpitations, a racing pulse, or maybe persistent headaches, migraines. For others, it's chronic neck pain, shoulder tension, backaches. Lots of people get GI upset stomach issues, IBS flare-ups, dizziness, fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, irritability, maybe uncharacteristic anger. The list is long.
It really is unique to each person.
It is. And that's where this analogy of the canary in the coal mine is just so incredibly relevant for all of us.
Okay, explain the canary analogy.
Historically, coal miners used to take a canary down into the mine. The bird would sing, meaning the air was safe. But if the air started getting toxic before the miners felt anything, the sensitive canary would stop singing or show distress.
Ah, it was the early warning system.
Exactly. The first undeniable sign that danger was present, telling the miners to get out immediately.
And we all have our own canary, our own personal stress signal.
We absolutely do. Everyone has a unique stress song, some subtle physical signal that tells them their internal stress levels are rising, often long before it feels like a full-blown crisis.
Like for me, I mentioned those weird spots on my tongue or my skin breaking out or catching colds all the time when I'm under pressure. Those are my canaries.
Those are yours. And it takes time to connect those dots, doesn't it? To realize, oh, this physical thing happens when I'm stressed. But once you identify your specific your personal stress song, it's invaluable. You can't unsee it. It's your built-in warning system.
Your body's way of sending up a flare.
Precisely. It's your mind-body connection giving you crucial biofeedback. Now, obviously, you always need to rule out other medical issues first. See a doctor.
Right. Stress is often that diagnosis of exclusion.
Exactly. You rule out organic problems before landing on stress. And stress can definitely make existing conditions worse, too. But there's also this ego thing, right? The self-perception barrier.
Yeah, people not wanting to admit they're stressed, especially high achievers.
Totally. That stress doesn't happen to people like me mindset. There's often this pride, this fear of being seen as weak or inadequate or unable to cope. It can be a really powerful mental block.
I've definitely felt that pressure. As a CEO, as a guy, there's that expectation of being invincible. It took my body basically shouting at me to finally listen.
It takes what it takes sometimes. But here's the reframe. Recognizing your canary, admitting you feel overwhelmed. It is not a sign of weakness or inadequacy. Not at all.
What is it then?
It's evidence that you're human, that you're perfectly normal, that you're not broken. It's actually a sign of profound self-awareness and strength to listen to those signals. Which leads to the big question for everyone listening.
Are you listening? What's your canary telling you right now?
Exactly. Identifying it. That might be the single most important first step towards genuine well-being.
Okay, let's dive even deeper into the actual mechanics. The biology of how stress floods our system. We need to talk about the main stress highway, the HPA axis.
HPA axis. Okay, break that down.
It stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The hypothalamus and pituitary are tiny, crucial command centers in your brain. The adrenal glands sit like little hats on top of your kidneys.
Got it. Brain and glands working together. Exactly. This whole interconnected system orchestrates our stress response, all that fight or flight stuff we talked about. When you perceive stress, real threat, or modern tiger, your brain and body sync up and react, unleashing this rapid cascade of hormones.
And cortisol is the big one here, right? The main stress hormone.
Cortisol is a major player, definitely. It surges during fight or flight, along with adrenaline and noradrenaline, prepping your body for action. But the problem comes with chronic stress.
Because the threat never really goes away.
Right. So the amygdala, the part that kicks off the alarm, often doesn't get the all-clear signal, doesn't shut off, which means those powerful stress hormones, especially cortisol, are just flowing through that HPA highway constantly.
Leading to chronically high cortisol levels.
Yep. And that's where you start seeing all sorts of negative effects throughout the body. Chronic inflammation, a precursor to so many diseases. Impaired immune functions, you get sick more easily. Major sleep disruption. And real impacts on your thinking memory, focus, clarity, all take a hit. It's a vicious cycle.
It really sounds like it. Now, something I've wondered about, and I know I've Googled this, is stress actually contagious? Like a cold? People talk about toxic workplaces.
That's a great question. Comes up all the time. So technically, no. Stress isn't contagious like a virus or bacteria. There's no microbe we pass around.
Okay, good to know.
However, what is contagious, in a manner of speaking, is emotion, mood. You can absolutely walk into a room and feel the tension, right? Pick up on a toxic vibe. Our brains are hardwired for social cues.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the mood shift sometimes.
Absolutely. And there's also this fascinating, though maybe more anecdotal, idea about the heart having an electromagnetic field that extends out, maybe up to 15 feet. Some theorize that contributes to the vibe we sense from people, like a subtle energy exchange.
Interesting. Even if the hard science isn't fully there on the heart field, the idea of sensing someone's state feels real.
It does. And it ties into something we do have strong science on in professional settings, therapeutic presence.
Like how a doctor's demeanor affects the patient.
Exactly. We call it therapeutic presence, or the therapeutic encounter. And research clearly shows it's not just how much time you spend with someone, but the quality of that time.
How so?
Studies show if a doctor simply sits down, makes eye contact, is fully present, maybe subtly mirrors the patient's posture, the patient perceives that doctor as more caring, more engaged, and that perception leads to real, measurable, positive health outcomes.
Like better adherence to meds or better blood sugar control.
Things exactly like that. Faster recovery times, too.
Yeah.
It's a tangible impact from genuine human connection and authenticity. You can't just fake presence. It has to be real.
And the voice plays a huge part in conveying that authenticity, doesn't it? Especially in audio like this.
Oh, profoundly. As
Yeah.
humans, even as babies, we're incredibly attuned to voice. Our BS meter for vocal tone is sky high. We often sense authenticity or the lack of it just for how someone sounds.
Yeah, you just know sometimes, on a gut level.
You really do. It's why this kind of format can be so powerful for sharing information authentically. It bypasses some of the visual filters and connects on a more primal level. Okay, so when we talk about making real, lasting changes, especially around managing stress and building well-being,
Yeah.
there's a biological reality we just have to work with. Our brains have limits.
Limits on handling change.
Exactly. This is what I call the resilience rule of two. Put simply, our brains can only really effectively handle about 2 new changes or significant adaptations at once before getting totally overwhelmed.
Only 2. Huh.
Only about 2. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone, maybe yourself, decide, right, I'm going to fix my stress, and they launch the kitchen sink approach?
Oh, yeah. New diet, hardcore exercise, meditate daily, more sleep, socialize more, learn Spanish, all starting Monday.
Precisely. And what usually happens?
Crash and burn by Wednesday, feeling like a failure.
Exactly. It never sticks. You burn out on the self-improvement, feel worse, and go back to old habits, maybe even more stressed than before.
But why? These are all good things. Why do they become stressful?
Because even positive changes are still stressors to your system. They require adaptation, they take energy. Your brain has to work to integrate them. This isn't just theory, it's backed by solid research.
Like what?
There was this landmark study back in the 60s by Drs. Holmes and Rahe. They looked at thousands of people and 43 common life events. Good stuff like getting married, new job, having a baby, graduating. Obviously negative stuff like divorce, bereavement.
Okay, and what do they find?
They found the more life events someone piled up in a short time, whether good or bad, the higher their overall stress load, and the significantly higher their chance of getting sick later.
Wow. So any big change adds to the stress load.
Yes,
Yeah.
because there's a limited amount of adaptation energy we have to regain stability after any significant event. Try to do too much at once, you overload the system, it breaks down. That's the biology behind the rule of 2.
So practically speaking, we need to ditch the massive overhaul approach.
Absolutely. Instead, focus on implementing just 2 small, manageable changes at a time. And small is the key word here.
And stick with those for a while.
Stick with them consistently for about 8 weeks. That's roughly how long your brain's neuroplasticity needs to really wire in a new habit, make it feel more automatic. Then, once those 2 feel solid, you can think about adding 2 more.
Okay, working with our biology, not against it. I like that. Small wins build momentum.
Exactly. It builds that self-efficacy we talked about. It's empowering.
When you're really deep in stress, that fight or flight mode, your thinking brain is offline, right?
Yeah.
How do you even figure out which two small changes to make when you can barely think straight?
That's a brilliant question. And that's where what I call the first reset comes in. It's about shifting your internal question from that paralyzing, self-critical, what's the matter with me, to the much more empowering, forward-looking, what matters to me most.
Focusing on purpose, your why.
Exactly. Deep research shows that having a clear why, a North Star, helps you navigate anything. It gives you motivation when things get tough. So my job often is to help people find their why. And for that, I use the MOST acronym.
Okay, most. Break it down for us.
M is for motivating. Does this goal genuinely light you up? Does it align with your values, pull you forward? O is for objective. Can you easily track it? Is it measurable, not just a vague feeling? S is for small. Is it small enough that success is pretty much guaranteed, not just possible, but really likely? And T is for timely. Can you realistically achieve it in, say, the next 3 months?
Okay, motivating, objective, small, timely. Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of I want to be healthier, a most goal might be I want to teach my grandson to throw a baseball this summer without my shoulder aching. Or I want to hike that specific trail by August without my knee pain flaring up.
Much more concrete, specific, personal.
Exactly. Gives you a clear metric, a personal North Star. It cuts through that overwhelming, fuzzy feeling of chronic stress and gives you something tangible to aim for. It shifts you out of survival mode and back into intentional action. Hashtag take 8. Movement, mindful moments, and just stress. Now, when it comes to tools for managing stress and building resilience, movement is just huge. There's so much research backing its power, almost magical.
But people often think they need to do, like, intense workouts, right? Which feels daunting.
That's the big misconception, and it stops so many people. The truth is you absolutely do not need to do intense, long workouts to get significant benefits. Even a little bit of consistent movement makes a profound difference.
Why? What does even a little bit do?
Critically, it gets you out of your head and into your body. It immediately interrupts those looping stress thoughts. Plus, the physical benefits are real, even from small amounts.
So we're talking small, easy things.
Totally. Think simple stuff. Parking your car further away at the store, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, even just for a floor or two. Going for a short, brisk walk, maybe just 20 minutes a day.
Things almost anyone can fit in.
Exactly. They feel achievable. And when you start doing them consistently, even these small things, it boosts your self-efficacy, that feeling of, hey, I can do this, which is incredibly empowering and silences that inner critic saying you're not doing enough.
Plus, you mentioned sitting can actually increase anxiety.
Yes. Research shows prolonged sitting can worsen anxiety and depressive symptoms. So moving counters that directly. You get significant mental health perks from just being more active, even if you don't lose weight or run a 5K.
Yeah.
It's about shifting from sedentary to active, even gently.
Okay, so movement is key. But you also talk about stress itself not being all bad, the Goldilocks principle, finding the just right amount.
That's right. It's not about eliminating stress entirely. That's impossible and honestly not even ideal. Human productivity, creativity, well-being, they all function on a bell-shaped curve.
A bell curve. How does that work with stress?
Okay, so at one end of the curve, you have too little stress. Think boredom, apathy, no challenge. Paradoxically, that leads to low productivity, even feeling kind of blah.
Right, understimulated.
Exactly. At the other extreme end, you have way too much stress, overwhelm, anxiety, feeling constantly frantic, near burnout. That also leads to terrible productivity, poor decisions, misery.
Okay, so the peak is in the middle.
The peak performance, the sweet spot, is right in the middle, that just right level of stress, sometimes called eustress as positive stress, enough challenge to keep you engaged and motivated, but not so much that it overwhelms you.
And most of us today are probably way over on the high stress side of that curve.
Way over. Highly stressed, overwhelmed, and as a result, much less productive and happy than we could be. So the goal is, how do we shift back towards that optimal middle zone in our busy lives?
Because, yeah, we can't just quit our jobs and meditate on a mountain.
Exactly. That's where honoring breaks becomes non-negotiable, even tiny ones.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting Microsoft study.
What did they find?
They found that taking just 3 or 4 10-minute breaks scattered throughout the workday significantly reduced people's overall stress, boosted their mood, improved productivity, and increased their engagement. Breaks aren't a luxury. They're essential.
Essential for managing stress and letting our brains reset.
Absolutely. They help nudge us back towards that sweet spot. And Microsoft Labs research went even further, looking at micro breaks, like 10 seconds.
10 seconds? How can 10 seconds help?
It relates to something called neural consolidation. Fancy term, but it just means how our brain cements new information into actual knowledge, into long-term memory.
Okay.
When we're constantly rushing, jumping from task to task with zero pause, our brain doesn't get those tiny moments. It needs to properly file away and consolidate what we just learned or experienced. Taking even just a deliberate 10-second pause gives your brain that critical processing beat.
So if something we're talking about right now really hits home for someone listening,
Pause for 10 seconds right now. Just
Yep.
absorb it. Let your brain do its consolidation thing.
I can definitely relate to the back-to-back schedule, no gaps. It feels like pressure just building, which actually leads perfectly into the idea of monotasking, the opposite of multitasking.
It is the antidote. Because
Yeah.
that whole idea of multitasking, it's mostly a myth. The science is really clear. Only about 2% of people can truly effectively multitask without performance dropping off a cliff.
Only 2%. So what are the rest of us doing?
We're task switching, rapidly bouncing our attention back and forth between things, giving each one only partial focus. And this constant switching, it's terrible for us.
How so?
It hammers our prefrontal cortex, the part we need for focus and complex thought. It makes it harder to solve complex problems. It tanks our concentration, messes with our mood, and ramps up our stress levels. In a world full of complex challenges, we just can't afford to be constantly task switching.
So if juggling isn't the answer, how do we actually get things done and feel accomplished?
The answer is monotasking, focusing on one thing at a time. And a brilliant technique for this is the Pomodoro technique. Heard of it?
Vaguely. Remind me.
It's super simple. Developed by Francesco Cirio back in the 80s. You set a timer, say, for 20 or 25 minutes. During that time, you focus intensely on one single task, no distractions. When the timer goes off, you take a mandatory 5-minute break. Then repeat with the next focused block.
Okay, short bursts of focused work, then a break.
Exactly. It protects and actually strengthens your prefrontal cortex. It stops that cognitive drain from switching. And at the end of the day, you don't just feel busy, you feel like you actually accomplished things because you completed focused tasks. It gives you back a sense of control and agency. It retrains your brain for deep work. Okay, let's tackle something huge that feeds into all this chronic stress, our digital lives, specifically something called popcorn brain.
Popcorn brain. That sounds descriptive. What is it?
It's a term coined by psychologist Dr. David Levy. It describes a very real biological phenomenon where your brain's circuitry literally starts to pop, becoming scattered, unable to settle due to the constant, relentless overstimulation from the fire hose of online information.
So it makes it hard to just be offline, where life is slower.
Exactly. It makes it incredibly hard to disengage, to just be present in the quieter, real world. And honestly, almost everyone has it to some degree now, whether they realize it or not. Think about waiting in line or at a red light.
Are you looking around or are you reaching for the phone? Yeah, it's usually the phone.
It's usually the phone. Now, is this the same as clinical internet addiction?
Good question.
Is it?
No, it's distinct. Internet addiction disorder is a serious clinical diagnosis where online use genuinely wrecks someone's life, work, relationships. Popcorn brain is much more widespread. It's almost the default state for many of us in modern life.
And stress makes it worse.
Definitely. When we're stressed, we're especially drawn to it. It triggers what I call the primal urge to scroll. Remember the amygdala always scanning for danger?
The brain's night watch person.
Exactly. Back in cave days, someone was literally scanning the horizon for threats. Now, with phones in our hands, we've all become the night watch person, incessantly scrolling.
Scanning for what? News, social threats? FOMO. All of the above. Scanning for bad news, yes, but also social threats. Comparing ourselves, trying not to miss out, needing to feel connected. All things our ancient brain interprets as vital for survival in a hyper-social world.
So even just having the phone nearby, buzzing or lighting up, is a constant drain because of that potential distraction.
It's a constant brain drain. Our phones are not benign tools. They are incredibly powerful attention magnets. They demand our focus. So how do we fight back against this primal urge and reclaim some peace?
Yeah, what can we do? We can't just ditch our phones entirely, usually.
Right. Complete abstinence often isn't the most effective or sustainable strategy for most people's mental health. The goal is more about decreasing your reliance on the phone, fundamentally rethinking your relationship with it.
Okay. Given we check them, was it 2,600 times a day?
That's the staggering average.
Yeah.
But we can reclaim agency. The key is creating deliberate digital boundaries. just like healthy boundaries in any relationship. I suggest three main strategies for a kind of media diet.
Okay, I'm listening. What are they?
First, time limits. Be specific. For example, consciously decide you'll only spend, say, 20 minutes a day consuming bad news or high-stress information. You can stay informed without mainlining anxiety.
Okay, cap the doom scrolling. Makes sense.
Second, geographical limits. During your workday, try keeping your phone physically further away, maybe 10 feet from your desk, making an effort to retrieve it. And critically, this is huge get it off your nightstand at night, ideally out of the bedroom entirely.
Oh, the nightstand one. That's tough, but probably powerful.
It's often the biggest game changer for mornings. Instead of scrolling first thing, you engage with your own thoughts, your routine, maybe your family.
Okay, time limits, geographical limits. What's third?
Third, logistical limits.
Yeah.
Create specific, non-negotiable digital boundaries in your daily routine, like absolutely no phones during meals, or setting a hard cutoff time for checking work email in the evening and sticking to it.
Small, consistent boundaries creating a buffer.
Exactly. A vital buffer between your attention and the constant digital pull.
This relates so much to something I've been noticing more and more, the impact of seeing graphic content online, even if it's happening far away.
Oh, it's a massive issue. A huge part of this cycle of trauma affecting our collective mental health. Research by psychologists like Roxane Silver has shown something really stark.
What's that?
Your personal risk of developing PTSD-like symptoms actually goes up when you consume graphic images or videos, even if the event is distant and doesn't involve you directly. It's a form of vicarious trauma.
Wow. So just seeing it repeatedly is harmful.
The more graphic stuff you see, the more your amygdala fires up, stays on alert. It feeds that primal urge to keep scrolling, scanning for danger, never feeling truly safe. And over time, that genuinely increases your risk for chronic anxiety, depression, other issues down the line.
So again, it's about finding that balance, being informed without traumatizing yourself.
Precisely. Limit the graphic visuals. Choose to read about events from trusted sources instead. That engages your thinking brain more, your fear brain less. And crucially, if you notice alarm bells, ongoing sleep problems, big anxiety spikes, intrusive thoughts, any thoughts of self-harm, please seek professional help immediately. These are real signs your system is overloaded.
Absolutely critical advice. And this stress response also connects to emotional eating, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. When your amygdala is in survival mode, it biologically craves high-fat, high-sugar, calorie-dense foods. Because to that primitive brain, immediate calories equal survival fuel, comfort. It's biology, not a character flaw. So having self-compassion around that is really, really important. Okay, let's talk about some truly powerful, practical tools. And one of the most immediate, accessible game changers is something we all do constantly. Breathing.
Breathing. Sounds simple, but you're saying it's key.
It's uniquely powerful. Because breath is the only physiological mechanism in our body that's under both voluntary and involuntary control. Your body breathes automatically, but you can also consciously change how you breathe.
Ah, that dual control, that's the lever we can pull.
Exactly. It makes breath an incredibly direct tool for regulating your stress response, for instantly influencing your nervous system.
So what's the best way to breathe for immediate calm? Something we can do right now.
Two great techniques. First is diaphragmatic breathing, belly breathing. It's actually how babies naturally breathe, using their diaphragm, but adults often shift to shallow chest breathing when stressed.
Okay, how do we do it?
Simple. Put a hand gently on your belly. As you inhale, really focus on letting your belly expand outwards, like filling a balloon, not just lifting your chest. Then exhale slowly, maybe through pursed lips, letting your belly fully fall.
Inhale, belly out. Exhale, belly in.
That's it. When you're stressed, your breathing gets short, shallow, rapid breath, which keeps your sympathetic fight-or-flight system activated. Deep belly breathing sends an immediate signal to your brain to switch to the parasympathetic rest and digest system. Instant calm.
Powerful. And the second technique?
Even simpler. A 3-second technique I call stop, breathe, be. Perfect for mundane tasks or just before switching activities. You literally just stop what you're doing, take one single conscious, deliberate breath, and then just be fully present in that moment, no judgment.
Stop, breathe, be like a mini reset.
Exactly. I used to do it before entering every patient's room as a resident. It shifts you from hyper-alertness to calm, reduces stress instantly, primes your brain, grounds you, keeps your mind where your feet are.
Love that. Okay, beyond breath, you mentioned writing, not just journaling, but therapeutic writing. What's the research on that?
Oh, the research is significant and really compelling. Psychologist James Pennebaker pioneered this. His technique, expressive writing, is straightforward but profound.
How does it work?
For 4 consecutive days, you set aside 20-25 minutes. You write continuously about a traumatic event, a major emotional upset, or even just a recent stressor that's weighing on you, a big argument, work stress, whatever. The key is, no one else reads it. It's just for you.
Just write freely for 20-25 minutes, 4 days in a row.
Right. Let it flow. You might feel a bit more distressed on day 2 or 3 as stuff comes up, but consistently by day 4, that distress drops significantly. And the benefits are amazing.
Right.
Better mood, sleep, less anxiety, irritability. Studies even linked it to higher GPAs, fewer hospital visits for chronic illness.
That's incredible from just writing. What's happening in the brain?
Several things.
Hmm.
One, it promotes cognitive reframing. Your perspective naturally shifts as you articulate it over the days. 2, you're processing deep, often unspoken emotions, getting them out instead of letting them fester inside and cause physical symptoms. 3, you're shifting brain activity from the emotional amygdala to the rational prefrontal cortex, organizing thoughts, making sense of it.
And it builds self-efficacy, too. Like, I can handle this.
Exactly. And self-compassion. It's why firing off an email when you're angry or stressed is almost always a disaster your amygdala is typing. Therapeutic writing lets you process first, find your own insights, regain agency.
Okay, breath, writing. And finally, this concept you call live a lifetime in a day. Sounds epic. What's the core idea?
It's really my universal prescription against that feeling of empty hustle. Getting to bed thinking, I was busy all day, but what's the actual point? We humans crave meaning, purpose.
So this helps instill that daily.
Yes, it breaks down the arc of a fulfilling life into 6 essential areas, suggesting you weave a little bit of each into every single day, even just for minutes.
Okay, what are the 6 areas? How do they fit?
1, childhood, a few minutes of genuine wonder, playfulness, listen to music you love, doodle, notice nature. 2, work, ensure it brings meaning and accomplishment, not just tasks, reframe or adjust if needed. 3, solitude, intentional time alone for reflection, creativity, recharge, even 5 quiet minutes.
Okay, wonder, work, solitude. What else?
4, vacation, not a big trip, but doing something you love purely for joy daily. Play an instrument, read fiction, garden, that vacation brain shift. 5, family community, actively connect with loved ones or community, a call, a text, a real conversation. 6, retirement, at day's end, take a few minutes to take stock, acknowledge wins, reflect on lessons, like looking back wisely.
Wow. So touching on each of those, wonder, work, solitude, vacation like joy, connection, and reflection every day.
Even briefly, it combats that draining feeling of just striving. It builds a complete, fulfilling human experience into each 24 hours.
So you go to bed feeling satisfied.
Purposeful.
Exactly. Not just exhausted. You feel a deep sense of satisfaction because you've touched on all these vital parts of a meaningful life. It fundamentally counters burnout by shifting you from autopilot reactivity to intentional living day by day.
This has been incredibly enlightening, really a deep dive into why so many of us feel stressed and burned out, and crucially, what we can actually do about it. The big takeaway for me is that chronic stress isn't normal, it's not a badge of success, absolutely not. And genuine well-being isn't about massive, unsustainable changes. It's about understanding our biology and making those small, consistent shifts, working with ourselves, not against ourselves.
Right. And as we wrap up, you wanted to leave us with a final thought, a question to ponder.
Yes. It's a question that's guided a lot of my own thinking, especially around how people present versus what they might be feeling inside. I'd invite you, the listener, to reflect on this. What idea that you once held to be absolutely true turned out to be entirely false?
That's a deep one.
Think about it in relation to your own beliefs about stress, about what strength looks like, about success. How might your assumptions be shaping your experience?
A powerful question to sit with. And as you reflect on that, maybe also start noticing your own canaries, right? Those personal signals your body sends when stress is rising.
Yes. Pay attention to those whispers. And consider which small strategy we talked about today feels most doable for you. Maybe it's just 3 deep belly breaths. Maybe it's putting your phone away 10 feet. Maybe it's trying that 25-minute monotasking block.
Because even the smallest step, taken consistently, can start to nudge you towards greater happiness, real fulfillment, genuine connection.
That's exactly it. The journey starts with that single small step, taken consistently day after day.